What is going on? I am Andrew Zimmel. This is Zimmel TV, and you are getting in on the ground floor. Not even the ground floor, like the basement floor of what could be, no, will be the next big thing. Want to thank you guys for watching episode 1, season 1, first live stream that we're doing over here on the channel. Subscribe, like, share the content with whoever you want to share it with. Let's do a little introduction, and then we'll get into what the show will be. Again, episode 1, season 1. So we are coming in at the ground level, okay? I am Andrew Zimmel. I am a younger-ish, I guess you could call it, radio host, fill-in host around Central Texas. And I love sports. I think that's where we need to start off. You see me wearing the Spurs stuff. You see the other stuff. I grew up loving sports, grew up playing sports, and like everybody else, I think I'm the next big thing. I'm so excited to do this show. I'm so excited to bring my favorite two things, which is A, sports, and B, radio together. And what we have currently, and the last 72 hours has really proven it, we have a lot of people who talk a lot of trash, a lot of just hot takes, bloviating, and we'll get into some of that here. But what we're going to try to do, not only on this episode, but throughout the time that we're doing this, is bring the truth. And I think that's really tough today. There's a lot of guys who will come on TV, go on the radio, go on podcasts, and just zag to zag. Zag of saking for the sake of zagging. Giving takes they don't really believe in, talking about things they don't really care about. And that's not what we're going to do on this show. If it's something that we don't care about, we're not going to talk about it. And if it's something we really don't care about, we'll probably talk about why we don't care about it and why everybody else is making a huge deal about it. You guys are going to be the ground basement level guys, the people who are checking the channel out for the first time, the people who have watched the TikToks and the YouTube videos and the YouTube shorts and the Instagram reels and all of that. You guys are the core fans. Some people call them P1s. I'm going to call you core guys because that's what you guys are going to be. Core guys going forward for the help of this channel and for the help of this podcast version too. So the plan is this. We are going to put out shows every day. 5 days a week. That is where I cut my teeth, is in the 5-day-a-week radio grind, 2 hours a day. So that's what we're going to do here on this channel. Every day of the week, 5 days a week, I should say every weekday, 5 days a week, our plan is to do this. 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, we will go live right here on this channel and on Twitch. We will bring you the best sports talk that we can possibly bring you, which, you know, it's going to be pretty great. And then we are going to cut the podcast or cut it up, put YouTube clips up, put the podcast up, put some TikToks up, whatever. And then going forward, you guys have to share that content to help us grow the brand. So I appreciate you guys from the jump. Let's get into it. We have a lot to talk about. It's Super Bowl week. I am one of the 5 people in the media who is not going to New Orleans. I'm not going to the city of the Super Bowl. We're not doing Radio Row. In fact, I'll give you a little bit of background here. I think Radio Row is kind of dumb in a lot of ways. I think that they've really commercialized it. It used to be where you would go to Radio Row and you would talk to maybe a former player, maybe you talk to a media member, but now everybody's selling something. It's the commercialization of Radio Row. I'm not a fan of it, but let me say this. I didn't get invited either. So if you don't get invited, you really can't complain about it, right? The other part, Super Bowl week, we have a ton of prop bets to get into. That's, to me, the second best thing about the Super Bowl. First is the game, second is the prop bets, third is the commercials. I'm not a commercial guy. I've never been the type of dude who's like, I can't wait to watch the Super Bowl for the commercials. That's not me. I don't like commercials. I've never liked commercials. We went through the best commercials earlier last week on the radio show, and I wasn't impressed. A lot of the best commercials happened 30 years ago. We haven't had an iconic Super Bowl commercial in a long time. And to be completely frank with you, once the game's over, I don't really think about them anymore. I just don't. I don't really care about the Super Bowl commercials. But so we're going to get into that. We'll get into the player or the position group that we care about today. Today's Monday. We'll go into it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'll break down the 5 different position groups. We'll go quarterbacks today, running backs tomorrow, wide receivers Wednesday. Okay, defense on Thursday, and then Friday we will sum it up and give you what the prediction will be for Super Bowl 59 on Sunday. So we got a lot to get into, but we have to start here with the Luka Doncic trade. Now, if you are living under a rock, if you're somebody who wasn't keeping up with the news over the past weekend, first off, shout out to you for not being able to keep up with the news cycle. But second off, let's get into it here. The Luka Doncic trade. We'll start with the trade in its entirety. So it happened on Saturday night. I was shocked by the breaking news. I was surprised that this is how it went. In fact, it was so shocking that Shams, people thought he had his phone hacked. He thought his Twitter account got hacked. We'll get into it here. This is a clip from Good Up this morning.
I cannot begin to tell you how many people asked me if you had been hacked. I can't possibly fathom how many people must have asked you if you had been hacked. Take everybody through everything they need to know. How in the wide, wide world did we get from where we were Saturday morning to where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, I thought my phone was hacked when I got the text messages with the details of the trade and when I got wind of the deal. But you peel back the curtain, and for the Mavericks, they honestly internally believe that this move puts them in a better position to win a championship. Of course, there are issues that they had, obviously, with Luka Doncic, his conditioning levels to an extent.
Let's start there. Let's talk about the conditioning levels of Luka. Now, the report came out that Luka was 270 pounds. He's 6'10", 6'9"? I don't quite understand what the big deal is when you're talking about a guy who, look, was he a little overweight? Sure. Could he still play basketball? Yes. He was still playing basketball at the highest level. He came into training camp this year a little overweight, came in with a hand injury, and from that point on, they just haven't been able to get on the same page, which is very disappointing.
But they have that belief, and when you think about the next several months, the next few years, that we're going to know the exact answer to whether they were right in this decision or if they were wrong. And they want to pair Anthony Davis as a center defensively with Kyrie Irving. They probably need another addition as well in the backcourt. They have 3 first-round picks now that they can use. And I don't think the Lakers at any point this season expected to be in contention to moving Anthony Davis. They didn't seek to move Anthony Davis, but when Nico Harrison, the Mavericks general manager, called and offered Luka Doncic, that changed the game.
Yeah, so that's the other part of this whole thing, is that I do not necessarily think that this was a decision that the Mavericks should have allowed their GM to make. Here's what I mean by that. When you have a guy who's relatively new to the organization, he's not been around. This isn't like somebody who was an assistant GM for the 11 team or had been around since 2007 and had 20 years of equity and knew what it was like for this franchise over the past 20 years. Because I'm not a Mavs fan, but I've kept track of the Mavs. I have friends who are Mavs fans, okay? Shout out Brendan Snow. I have been a person living in Texas. You cannot not pay attention to what the other Texas basketball teams are doing, whether they be the Rockets or the Mavericks. I could tell you that this is an organization that climbed out of the gutter. This is an organization with Dirk Nowitzki in the early 2000s that was a very competitive team. But if you remember, the rap on this team and this organization prior to that 2011 run that Dirk had was that they were the only franchise in the state without a title. They were the only franchise in the state without Texas without a ring. And Dirk had one of the best runs in NBA history to win his first championship, okay? One of the best runs of all time to win the title. He was already a legend in Dallas, but he turned into a legend in the NBA. He went from a guy who was fringe top 30 to a guy who now is securely locked in, I think, most people's top 20, top 15, okay? Moving off of Dirk after they lost in 06 would be the equivalent of moving off Luka now. Nico Harrison has not been around long enough, and the ownership group who bought it from Mark Cuban have not been around long enough to make this type of move. And if it was a move that sent him to any other team, if this move sent him to the Clippers even, in LA, but went to the Clippers instead of the Lakers, I can guarantee you that there would be an investigation, and then this trade would be overturned, and that Adam Silver would have stepped in. Because Nico Harrison does not know Dallas. He does not know what this fan base has gone through. You don't know it until you've gone through it. You don't know what these people have dealt with as a fan base until you have gone through it. He should not have been allowed to bring this trade to the table. And anybody in that building who was around for 06 when they lost in the finals, who was around for 07 when they lost to the We Believe Warriors, who was around for that 2011 Dirk run to win a championship, would have known better. They would have known that this organization does not trade their guys. They don't trade their superstars. They have made the mistake. They let Steve Nash walk out that door, and then they never made that mistake again. They kept Dirk as happy as possible. He wanted to be there. And just like Dirk, Luka wanted to be there. And Nico Harrison let him walk out that door. It's like the reverse of the Patino game. Those of you that listen to the Dan Le Batard Show know what the Patino game is. Every time a team loses in the playoffs, Rick Pitino famously with the Celtics said, Larry Bird's not walking through that door. Kevin McHale's not walking through that door. It's a reverse Patino game. Dirk Nowitzki should not walk through that door. Luka Doncic should not walk out that door. And yet here we are. So let's hear it. Luka saying hello to the new fans. Luka saying hello to the fans in LA. Now this is what's sad, because this one, let's get it up here. This one's going to tear your heart out if you're a Mavericks fan.
What's up, Laker fans? I'm in LA. Excited to meet you all.
Excited to meet y'all. That one's got to hurt. And according to reports, he was ready to buy a house in Dallas. That he was looking to make a long-term investment to stay in Dallas, Texas, to stay a Maverick for life. Now, this is the original Luka trade too. And this is coming from the Bill Simmons pod. Let's get that one pulled up for you. Because originally this is Kirk Goldsberry, who is pretty well connected. I think that he's one of the better NBA writers. Wrote a really good book about the NBA in the early or late 2010s, talking about that three-point revolution. He's on the Bill Simmons podcast today talking about the original move, the original trade for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, and there's a week-long process. One of my sources inside the Lakers was indicating that the deal was bigger, and I think you guys were literally joking about this last night, that there were 2 firsts, and there was Dalton Connect, and the deal got whittled down because I think Rob Pelinka was able to convince the Dallas Mavericks that Luka is a lot of risk. Yeah. And you guys are right for trying to look at this way, because this guy, is drinking or is whatever, his weight problem, whatever it is. So they were able to convince it. This was a weeks-long process. That's another thing that came out today, is this wasn't, this was and Dallas
almost
started
3.5 weeks.
Dallas started it, dude. This fell in Rob Pelinka's lap.
That has to be the wildest thing about this trade, where Luka Doncic goes to the Lakers from the Mavericks. Anthony Davis sent back to Dallas. And you just got to feel bad, honestly, for Mavericks fans. And it's rare, I think, in sports for fan bases, for the most part, to have any sort of empathy or sorrow for other fan bases. The only other time I can think of, and this is kind of morbid, the only other time I can think of where you had fan bases legitimately having empathy and feeling bad for another organization's fans was the passing of Kobe Bryant. That is the only other time I can remember in my lifetime where you genuinely felt sorrow for another fan base where the world felt bad for Laker fans, had sympathy and empathy for Laker fans losing the legend Kobe Bryant. But it's not the same, clearly not the same thing, but I do feel sports sorrow for Dallas Mavericks fans today. And I'm going to feel bad for them probably for the rest of, at least the rest of Luka's career. And I want to wrap it up here before we go to a break. We're taking a quick break here and then we'll come back. This could not have happened better for the gas bags, for the hot take artists, for the sports talk hosts, for the podcasters. It could not have been a better situation for any of those groups of people because it's a win-win. If Luka Doncic is great, he's 25 years old, I put the ring total for him over under at 1.5. I put the ring total for Anthony Davis and LeBron at 1.5. They hit the under. So I have the over under set for Luka just in LA at 1.5 rings. If he is successful and wins championships in LA, then we're going to make fun of the Dallas Mavericks for the rest of time. The same way we made fun of the Suns and the Kings and the Hawks for passing up on Luka. And if it does not work, if the Lakers lose Luka into free agency, or Luka does become a health risk and does eat himself and smoke himself and drink himself out of the league, then we can make fun of Luka. And we have a take there where the Mavericks were right. And the Lakers look like the fool for buying into somebody like Luka Doncic. It's a win-win. Either the Mavericks are the biggest fools in the world, or the Lakers, the flagship organization for the NBA, get played for a fool. Either way, the takes will be hot. All right, when we come back, we're talking San Antonio Spurs and De'Aaron Fox. Did the Spurs actually make the best trade of the weekend? We'll have more for you next right here on Zimmel TV. You're listening and watching. Welcome back to Zimmel TV. That is what you are listening and watching currently. Thank you guys. Like I said, P1's first show as we continue to roll along here on YouTube and on Twitch. Now, you got to remember as we continue to do this that there are, a couple of hiccups. There might be a couple of tech issues going forward, but we're going to clean those all up. It's a one-man wrecking crew over here. Andrew Zimmel hanging out with you. All right, let's do it. The San Antonio Spurs, for 20-plus-ish years, were the model franchise in the NBA. They were the franchise that every other franchise tried to imitate. They looked for guys who fit that Spurs culture. The coaching tree for Greg Popovich, absolutely outstanding. I think there was something at one point like 7 of the 30 coaches were former Spurs assistants at one point, which is absolutely incredible. That is an insane number when you really put it into context, that like half the league is, or a fourth of the league is former Spurs guys. That's kind of a big deal. But since then, the Spurs have struggled. They had a little bit of a tough stretch over the post-Duncan years. You got the Kawhi Leonard saga that occurred, which ultimately ended up with him winning a championship in Toronto. The DeMar DeRozan stretch. It's only really been 3 years of a true rebuild, not a retooling, not a, let's try to figure something out, a true rebuild in San Antonio. And of course, the Spurs do it better than anybody else. They were able to go get a all-star, a all-NBA caliber player early in this rebuild. So let's play here. This is the full trade, and it gets better. So Spurs end up trading for De'Aaron Fox, something that was in the works all week last week. We teased it. Will it happen? Won't it happen? And it did happen on Sunday. So Spurs get De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings, who were supposed to be the team that should have gotten the most, and they did when it comes to assets. However, they did not get as much as you would think. And we'll get into that here in a second. The Kings get Zach LaVine, Sidney Kisco, 3 first-round picks, which would be the 2025 Charlotte Hornets, 2027 Spurs, 2031 Minnesota pick, which was the Rob Dillingham pick that they traded on draft night. The reason that pick has mattered so much to people around the league and fans is because that would be a year after Anthony Edwards might be already out of Minnesota. So if they're trying to tank, end up trying to get another star, or Anthony Edwards leaves and something else happens, or he's injured, or it's so far in the future that you would think 6 years is a long time in sports. You would think that the Minnesota Timberwolves may not be a real contender in the Western Conference. Then 3 second-round picks, a 2025 Chicago pick, a 2028 Denver pick, and then the Kings get their own 2028 pick back. The Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 pick back from the Spurs. So the Spurs essentially gave their pick, Minnesota's pick, and that's pretty much it. And the rest of it was either picks that Chicago had or picks that the Spurs had from Chicago. When you rank this trade, it's obvious that the Spurs were the winners, that the Spurs came on top. And I like Trey Jones, and I like Zach Collins. And in fact, as a basketball fan, I like Kevin Huerter. I like what he brings to the table as well. But the Spurs obviously were the team that came out on top. They went and got an all-NBA player. They went and got an all-star point guard to put next to the generational talent that is Victor Wembanyama. This is something I've been saying for the longest time, that you, if you're the Spurs, have to find a way immediately to start adding pieces around Wemby. There was a take I heard earlier this year, in fact, about Wembanyama's sophomore season and the curse of the phenom, okay? LeBron James came in the league, immediately made the Cavaliers a playoff contending team. And by year 4, was in the NBA Finals. Wasn't at the peak of his powers yet. Still 2 years away from winning an MVP. Gets them to the NBA Finals. Now, you might say that's a bad Eastern Conference, but still, to be 20-something years old in your early 20s and drag a team to the finals it doesn't matter what the conference looks like. The maturity to get there is impeccable. Then you consider Luka Doncic, who in his sophomore season was already looking as a guy who could lead your team to the finals. He gets his team to the finals by year 24. He's 24 years old, ends up in the NBA Finals. We look at Wemby, who's 21 years old, and because he is as good as he is, you have to either actively try to sabotage the season to get higher draft picks, to end up with lottery picks, or you end up being a play-in team, which the Spurs would have been if they hadn't have traded for De'Aaron Fox. The Spurs are looking to be a competitive team. They do not want to try to sabotage their season. They had to put somebody next to Wembanyama. And just come to find out, there is an all-star point guard who wants to play in San Antonio. And oh, by the way, in case you were curious, he's a Clutch client. He's a Rich Paul client. Clutch, the same agency that reps LeBron James. Clutch, the same agency that has essentially run the NBA for the better part of a decade now, being kingmakers, deciding where superstars are going to end up playing. This is something that a lot of people are not paying nearly enough attention to. Something that you worry about, potentially, could this be the type of move that gets Rich Paul closer to getting his next king that he can help run the board with, which would be Wembanyama. I still think it's an incredible move. I still think that you make the move no matter what. De'Aaron Fox is that type of player. He is all-star level talent, and the Spurs end up with a player who in the pick and roll is great, who off the dribble is great, and who can make everybody on this team better. I thought it was a grand slam, a home run, when they went and got Chris Paul over this offseason. Because Chris Paul, for years, has been a guy who I've wanted to get my hooks into. Because not only is he an incredible talent, even in year 19, but he's a guy who can teach the younger players on this team. He's a guy who can be a coach on the court, a coach in the locker room. He's a leader, proven leader. It makes me excited to go get De'Aaron Fox. But NBA TV, let's hear it. They say that this now puts pressure on the Spurs and puts pressure on Victor Wembanyama to actually make something happen. Let's hear it.
Victor Wembanyama, already early in his career, has pretty much showed us he's been frustrated at times this year when they haven't won games. It feels like that timeline has advanced. He wants to win now.
He does, and he should. He's that kind of player. He's probably the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. The Spurs have been very patient. We know the historic run they were on under the leadership of R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich, 2 decades in the playoffs every single year. That streak was snapped 4 or 5 years ago, and they haven't been back to the playoffs since. So this has kind of been uncharted waters in San Antonio. But now with an emergent star in the front court in Victor Wembanyama, with De'Aaron Fox, one of the fastest and most explosive guards in the league in the backcourt, and then by retaining their complementary pieces, I really like the fit on the wing with Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, who are able to hang on to. So this is a team that's right on the cusp of the play-in the Western Conference. We know it's pretty bunched in that 6 to 11 or 12 range in the West, but the Spurs are right there, and this sends a message to Victor Wembanyama in particular that they're not going to wait anymore, that they're pushing some of their chips into the center of the table to try to get into the play-in or hopefully the playoffs this year, but also they retain enough assets and flexibility to build around Victor and Fox going forward.
And that's such a big deal too, I think. The fact that they were not afraid to go add a piece, that they proved to Wemby that, hey, we can go and get you stars to put next to you. Now let's look at the NBA playoff standings as they currently sit. San Antonio currently on the outside looking in of that play in 21 and 25. They have a game later tonight as well. But then you look at the teams that are ahead of them. The Dallas Mavericks, who just traded their franchise star for a 31-year-old whose nickname is Day-to-Day Davis. The Sacramento Kings, who just moved off their point guard and got Zach LaVine in return. The Phoenix Suns, who are trying to actively move Bradley Beal, who could potentially end up moving off of Kevin Durant. We'll get to that story here in a moment. And the rest of the West, that you think at some point one of these teams in the top 4 here, OKC, Memphis, Houston, or Denver, will start to fall off a little bit, whether that be due to injuries or due to youth in the Rockets case. I just think that the Spurs are set themselves up in a perfect position, that they have a young core. They got a guy who is on the same timetable as Wembanyama, 27 years old, in the prime of his career. Wembanyama, who's still getting better every single game. You're setting yourself up that you can make a legitimate push for the NBA Finals by Victor's 4th year in the league. That Wembanyama could be on the same track as those guys like LeBron and Luka. And that's what the Spurs fans hope for, and that's what the Spurs fans want. When we come back, Myles Garrett does something that's head-scratching. We'll see where he ends up next on Zimmel TV. You're listening and watching. Welcome back to Zimmel TV. Andrew Zimmel hanging out with you guys on a Monday, Super Bowl week. And look, reminder, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to us on YouTube and on Twitch, as well as we're going to bring the podcast out too. It's going to be Zimmel.tv podcast. You can listen to all the segments that we cut up and put up there for you as well. So no matter where you go, we will be there. We're always there for you, sports fans. So I'm excited to keep doing the show. We're going to keep doing it for as long as we can. We are planning, this is the plan right now, is 5 to 7 weekdays Central, 6 to 8 Eastern. 6 to 8 Eastern, 5, 7 Central. And we will do the show weekdays right here. All right, so let's talk Myles Garrett, the future Hall of Famer. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. Guy is on his way for sure. Future Hall of Famer put out a trade request today. And here, let's read it together. As a kid dreaming of the NFL, I was focused on the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, and the goal fuels me today more than ever. My love for the community of Northeast Ohio and the incredible fan base of the Cleveland Browns has made this one of the toughest decisions of my life. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man I am today. While I love calling this city my home, my desire is to win and compete on the biggest stages that won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It's always been to compete and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. That is Myles Garrett, the edge rusher for the Browns. So let's hear from Adam Schefter earlier today on the Pat McAfee Show.
We thought the trade between Luka, AD, and then Utah getting sprinkled in there would be the biggest conversation. It certainly still is, but Myles Garrett, perennial All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year candidate every single year, wanting to be traded with 2 non-guaranteed years left on his contract, just 1 week removed from the general manager saying they aren't listening to any trade offers for him. How did we get here? And is he only going to contenders, or is he going to other buildings that have money and potentially a better vision than Cleveland Browns?
So first off, absolutely love me some Pat. I think Pat McAfee's really good, adds a lot of juice. There are people who are really big Pat McAfee fans. I'm not one of those people. I do respect and like Pat. Read the document, read the request, read the trade request. We just read it together right here. Not very difficult to do. What do you mean? Is he only going to? He says he wants to compete. He says he wants to compete and try to win a Super Bowl. I don't think the New York Giants are competing for Super Bowls right now. It doesn't feel like the Giants are competing for Super Bowls. It doesn't feel like the Jaguars are competing for Super Bowls. Come on, Pat. Read the room. Read the documentation, the request. So it was only like 400 words.
If he's going, again, because we have a team here in the Cleveland Browns. I know we get swept up in the moment. We've got this Defensive Player of the Year requesting a trade out of Cleveland, and this is not a surprise to the Browns. The Browns knew about his unhappiness. I think they've asked around, they've prepared for it, they've gotten some opinions about how to best handle this situation, knowing that it could be coming, and I think that they are dug in and entrenched in their stance that they're not going to trade Myles Garrett, that's not the kind of player you move on from. You're talking about arguably the best defensive player in the league, 29 years old. That's a player that helps you win a Super Bowl, and that's what the Browns want to try to do. So, again, we can continue to talk about this, and we will, because it's certainly interesting. But we also have one side here in the Cleveland Browns that doesn't want to trade Myles Garrett and says it won't trade Myles Garrett. And the GM, Andrew Berry, even has told reporters that he doesn't care if he's offered 2 number ones, he's not trading Myles Garrett. Now, what we have, what changes the equation some potentially, is we've got Myles Garrett now going public with the statement and the idea that he does want out of Cleveland. He wants to play on a team where he believes he's got a chance to win a Super Bowl, which obviously he doesn't feel like is the case in Cleveland. So,
anybody disagree with that take? Would anybody disagree that the Cleveland Browns, who finished the year this year in the bottom half of arguably one of the tougher divisions in the sport, with a quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who's coming off another leg injury. 3-14 this season for the Browns, which makes them one of the worst teams in the AFC and one of the worst teams in the NFL.
The Browns, if they trade him, there's acceleration on his contract to the tune of about $35 or so million.
Now let's look at this together. Request a trade. So the new team acquires $19.5 million in the first year, $25 million in the second year. But the problem is that the Browns would have a $36.2 million dead cap hit. The NFL loves to do this. They love to make sure that you can't really trade anybody. You really can't move anybody in the NFL unless it's a guy on a rookie contract or a guy on a very team-friendly contract. Otherwise, the dead cap, the dead money cap hits on your team will absolutely cripple you from doing anything moving forward.
They're already over the cap. To trade him becomes financially difficult and challenging. Not saying they can't do it, but it's hard. So I think the whole situation here, Pat, is honestly, in my mind, how dug in is Myles Garrett? How miserable is he prepared to try to make life for the Cleveland Browns? Is he willing to sit no matter what when they go to training camp? If they haven't traded him by then, is he continually going to issue statements saying how unhappy he is and how much he wants out? Does he make it such that he forces them to trade him, or do they acquiesce to his wishes and listen to him when that's not what they want to do? And they've been perfectly clear about that.
So let's be real here. How miserable can he make the Cleveland Browns? Buddy, the Cleveland Browns have always been miserable. They live in Cleveland. It doesn't matter how miserable they're going to make them. Now, the big thing to me is that between Myles Garrett in Cleveland and TJ Watt in Pittsburgh, there could be potentially, along with Micah Parsons in Dallas, there could be multiple very good Hall of Fame level quality edge rushers available to come on the market. And if that is the case, Abdul Carter, who's in the NFL draft this season coming out of Penn State, you could potentially have a situation where you have multiple Hall of Fame level guys. Abdul Carter looks like Will Anderson Jr. when he came out of Alabama. I am that high on this guy coming out of Penn. I think that he could be legit. I think he could be a guy who year 2 is all pro if drafted by the right team. Myles Garrett, how difficult are you going to make life for everybody around here? And this is Adam Schefter talking about the legitimacy of trying to win that NFL championship.
Again, is this a business play by Myles Garrett? I don't think so. I think he legitimately wants to be in a place where he feels like he's going to have a chance to win the Super Bowl. But again, is there anything that could get him off that changes his mind?
So last question from me, and obviously we're all learning about this as we go. So that means he's only going to teams that are contenders? Is that what we're hearing? Or
that's what, in his ideal world, that's what he's doing.
Okay.
Now, again, what if they said, we're trading you, I'm making this up to Chicago. Is Chicago, is Chicago a Super Bowl contender right now? But what?
I think with Myles Garrett, they might be. Now, let's hear this. These are the odds for Myles Garrett currently, and these odds are from bookies.com. 2025 team odds. Detroit Lions plus 350. If you remember, Aiden Hutchinson went down with a leg injury, part of the reason why the Lions aren't playing this Sunday. Los Angeles Chargers plus 400. It's pretty much been said that they're not going to trade Garrett within the division or within the conference. I don't think the Chargers could be the team. The Washington Commanders plus 425. They had a very good edge rusher in Chase Young. Chase Young didn't have the engine and the motor that they wanted. They moved off of him. 2025 team odds. Remember, Cleveland Browns, he stays there, plus 500. Not terrible numbers. 49ers, plus 600. Put him next to Nick Bosa. You're looking at one of the best defenses in the NFL. Philadelphia Eagles, plus 950. The rich get richer. The team playing on Sunday gets one of the best guys in the league. Atlanta Falcons, plus 1,800. Are you trying to figure out and try to solve your problems in Atlanta? Worst division in the NFL this season, the NFC South. You could get Kirk Cousins in return for a trade for Myles Garrett. Something to think about. Buffalo Bills plus 2,000. The Bills, a great team, supposedly in the conversation for TJ Watt as well. We'll see if that happens this offseason. And the field plus 1,200. So a lot of options for Myles Garrett. He asks out of Cleveland today. Cleveland, this one's for you, man. That's a tough look. We come back. We'll wrap up hour one of Zimmel TV, and we'll talk Jimmy Butler. He's not re-signing with the Heat. He's also not going to Golden State. Where will Jimmy Butler go next? You're listening and watching to Zimmel TV. Welcome back to Zimmel TV. Andrew Zimmel hanging out with you on a Monday of Super Bowl week. A lot to get into in hour number two. We're going to talk Super Bowl. We'll talk position. Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes. Everybody says it's quarterback v. quarterback, even though neither are on the field at the same time. But I want to talk Jimmy Butler not re-signing with the Miami Heat, not re-signing now with the Golden State Warriors either. So it is a very tough look for Golden State. They are trying their hardest to pull something together. Now, Shams was on Pat McAfee earlier today. This is via NBA Central on Twitter, talking about the Warriors calling everybody.
Times are the Warriors.
The Warriors are legitimately calling about every all-star player. You just name the all-star player. The Warriors have probably called it. And Paul George, they have called it. They made calls on every star. And that, of course, includes players like LeBron, players like Kevin Durant, players like Jimmy Butler. They are making calls. They are dead set on trying to find another star player, superstar player with Stephen Curry. That is another subplot to this trade deadline as well.
Times are the Warriors.
The Warriors are legitimately calling about.
Here's the deal. The Warriors won the title in 2022 and then immediately combusted into flames after Draymond sucker punched his teammate. Didn't trade Draymond, sent Jordan Poole to Washington. You know what Jordan Poole's up to? Anybody has watched a Wizards game this season? Does anybody know who's on the Wizards? They had a chance to keep the dynasty going. They had multiple chances. They had a chance to draft LaMelo Ball. Decided to go with James Wiseman. They had a chance to trade Draymond Green or Klay Thompson, add some different pieces, younger pieces to put next to Curry. Didn't do it. Sat on their hands. Moved off Jordan Poole. They had chances after chances after chances to help Steph Curry. And they just didn't do it. And now that the writing is on the wall that Curry is coming to the end of his career, now that the writing is on the wall that Steph Curry might ask out this offseason, he might not want to finish his career in Golden State because of the mismanagement, because he still thinks he has a little bit left in the tank, and he looks around and he says, Steve Kerr, Joe Lacob, Warriors fans, I want to win a ring. I'm at 4. I want to get to 5. I want to be in the same class as Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan. But the thing that those two guys did is stay where they got drafted. Okay, those guys stayed with their organization for 20 years. Steph Curry wants to do that. He wants to be in Golden State, but he also wants to win rings. And that's where it's going to come down to, at the end of the day, what do you want more? Now, this is according to Jake Fisher. Phoenix is entering Monday's business, continuing to signal that it does not plan to move Kevin Durant before the deadline. But the Suns are believed to be listening to various teams' pitches for the 35-year-old. Durant, meanwhile, said he is aware of this. He's been made aware. Wouldn't it be funny if he ended up back in Golden State? Back where he won his titles, back where he left because it was Curry's team and not his team, that Kevin Durant goes back to the Bay. Wouldn't that be kind of poetic? Wouldn't that make you happy as a basketball fan? I feel like the Kevin Durant villain arc is kind of over now. The Kevin Durant villain arc that we all were rooting against this guy because he, quote, ruined basketball by leaving Oklahoma City and going to Golden State and building a super team, a team that was 73-9 and lost in 7 games to the Cleveland Cavaliers. That Durant ruined basketball by going and joining that team, the team that beat him in the Western Conference Finals. Ruined basketball. But now, after a failed super team in Brooklyn and after a failed super team in Phoenix, more and more people are coming around to what Kevin Durant is. A legendary player, a Hall of Famer, one of the best players to ever lace him up. We're coming around to that now. I did not like Kevin Durant when he went to Golden State. I didn't like Kevin Durant when he was in Brooklyn. But now I can come to appreciate it because it's in the twilight of his career. And you want to appreciate greatness while you still have it. How many times have we said this? That you're going to miss this when it's gone. You're going to miss LeBron James. You're going to miss Steph Curry. You're going to miss Kevin Durant. There are times in every one of those guys' career who I've rooted against them, who I hated on their game, who I went on Twitter or went online and slandered. But now that we're on the end of it, now that we've come to the tail end, I'm rooting for Durant to go to Golden State. I want LeBron James to get Luka Doncic. I want these guys to have one last run. I want one last great playoff run out of Steph Curry. I want one last great playoff run out of Kevin Durant, LeBron James. Am I rooting for them to win the chip? No. I want the Spurs to win because that's the team I grew up loving. I want Minnesota to win because that's the team I grew up covering. I want Boston to win because that's the team I've grown to enjoy. I like the Jaylens. I like the Jays, Jalen and Jason Tatum. I don't want these guys to win titles, but I do want to see them in the playoffs one more time. And it's currently constructed. I'm not quite sure the Suns are good enough to get out of the first round. I'm not quite sure the Warriors are good enough to make a real run. There's no star next to Steph Curry currently. And if it means that they have to go out and trade a bunch of pieces to go get LaMelo Ball or Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson or Paul George, I'm all for it. But it does stink that the Warriors had chances to do this earlier. And now when they realize that they're going to miss this when they're gone, now that they realize that with Steph Curry in the twilight of his career, that they want to give him one last run. That is the part that is disappointing. Not that they're trying to go after other stars and try to add pieces and that they might have to overpay for them. That's not the part that's distressing. It's the fact that they could have done this already and they didn't. All right, when we come back, we will start hour 2 of Zimmel TV. We got to come up with a better name than what we have currently. We'll figure something out. Again, first show We'll get it all done, getting it all out of the way. When we come back, Super Bowl week next on Zimmel TV. Welcome back to Zimmel TV. I am Andrew Zimmel, hanging out with you on a Monday Super Bowl week. We are the only group not at Radio Row. That is fine. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you. If you are a repeat listener of my content, whether that be on Twitter, whether that be on Twitch, whether that be wherever, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to episode 1, season 1, the first of many shows that we are going to do. Now, the plan is weekdays right here, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, 2-hour show daily right here on YouTube and on Twitch. So we are going to make sure that that happens. Tomorrow's show going to be a little different. We're only going to do about an hour. Friday's show going to be a little different. Going to do an hour, but it's going to be an hour later. Tomorrow will be an hour from 6 to 7 Eastern, 5 to 6 Central. Does that make sense? All right, we'll be fine. It's going to be a lot of fun. Want to appreciate you guys for checking us out. Continue to subscribe, like, share the content wherever you find your stuff. We're going to turn this into a sweet little podcast as well. So cool stuff. I want to appreciate you guys. So Super Bowl week is here. Super Bowl week is here. I hate the fact that we dragged the season out this long. The 17-game schedule this year was fine. I don't like the 2 weeks It makes sense for the NBA or for the NFL. It makes sense for the competitiveness. You give these guys enough time to rest, to recuperate, so that you have the best possible game that you can. However, I do argue that giving these guys this much time off does lead to a little rust. The difference, though, is that the Eagles have played in this game 2 years ago. The Chiefs played in this game every single season, it feels like. They're going for a three-peat. Their fourth time going to the Super Bowl in 5 years, which is a record. I don't think any other team has done anything close to that from my keeping up with things. They are, at least in this era, they are by far the most dominating team in the NFL. And I'm excited for them. I'm happy that we have a team to root against, that we have a team like the Chiefs that are dynastic, that do have a chance to do something very special. I am a guy who roots for history. A lot of people aren't like this. I find the people who are older do not like this. I am somebody who is always rooting for history to be made, whether that be Barry Bonds breaking the home run record, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa breaking the home run record. I root for those things, even though there's a little, cheating involved. I root for the Patriots when they're going for a perfect 19-0 season. I root for the Warriors to go 73-9. Now, was I happy that the Cavs came back and won? Yes, because in that way, there's history as well. You have a team coming back from 3-1 and winning a title for Cleveland for the first time in 50 years, and you have a 73-9 team and not winning the title? Come on, doesn't get better than that. I'm always rooting for history. I'm rooting for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl because of the historical factor to it. I'm rooting for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl because Patrick Mahomes is on the cusp of doing something that no other quarterback has ever done, which is win the Super Bowl 3 consecutive times. To win Super Bowl MVP 3 consecutive times. To be a 4-time champion in his first 7 seasons. That the likelihood of him winning the title is more than him missing the playoffs. I'm here for that. I like that. I root for that. I want that. If my teams aren't in it, you see my little Minnesota Vikings ball behind me. If my teams aren't in it, I primarily root for the AFC because the Vikings are in the NFC, and that means the team that wins the Super Bowl beat the Vikings at some point. Hopefully, at least. Hopefully they were in the playoffs and lost to the eventual champion. I don't want that, though. I don't want to be on the championship DVD. I don't want to be on the back of your T-shirts. I don't want to be on the back of your commemorative coins and plates. I don't want that for my team. I want a team out of the AFC. I want a team that didn't beat me in the playoffs. A team that's not from my conference to win the title. That's what I root for. So the biggest news of the day is not the Super Bowl, however, as we count down to it. The biggest news of the day is fallout from a trade that might go down as one of the worst in NBA history. It might go down as one of the worst trades in sports history. And it goes something like this. Luka Doncic, now a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. I like this Team Kawashar tweet earlier today, and it made me laugh. Dirk, who is not a defensive stopper by any means, who struggled on defense, who struggled to stay in front of the other team's best big man, who ended up having to be hid on some of the lesser offensive talented big men in the league. Dirk would have had occasional defensive lapses. This is a Tim Kawashar tweet. Dirk would have had some occasional defensive lapses and conditioning issues, as I recall. I wonder how many years it would have played in Dallas before Nico decided that he was too much trouble. And that is where we leave things currently in Dallas, is that it seems like it was the Dallas Mavericks front office that had an incredible issue with Luka. The Mavericks were reportedly over Luka. This is according to Mark Stein, who cut his teeth, started his career covering the Dallas Mavericks. Quote, with Doncic, meanwhile, one phrase you keep hearing basically is that the Mavericks are over him. Dallas has likewise said that they have cooled on its star insistence on hiring his own team of training experts, even though it was done at his own expense. Dallas Mavericks were not paying for Luka's trainers. They were not paying extra to have special Slovenian doctors and trainers come and help their guy, even though most organizations would do that for their franchise marquee player. Most organizations would kowtow to their star to try to make life as enjoyable as possible for a foreign-born player in a state, in a country that is, again, foreign to him, to handle the bulk of his medical and nutritional needs separate from the club starting in the 2023-24 season. Now, if you remember, there was once a pretty good NFL quarterback who had won some championships who decided that he wanted to have his own trainer and have his own health nutritionists around. It was the TB12 method. It was Tom Brady. Now, Luka has not won championships in Dallas, but he got them to the finals last year. He was games away from winning a championship, only the second in the franchise's history. 25 years old, going up against a juggernaut Boston Celtics team, mind you, and fighting valiantly. I want to play or show you those stats real quick here on the stream, and we'll read them for you here on the podcast version. Here's the game log from last year's Western Conference Finals and NBA Finals. So the Mavericks won in 5 games against Minnesota. In those 5 games, Luka averaged 27 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 8 assists, along with 2 steals, while playing 40 minutes per game. Doesn't seem like a conditioning issue to me. Averaged 40 minutes per game in a 5-game series to win the West, okay? In the NBA Finals, Luka Doncic, in 5 games against the Boston Celtics, averaged 29 points, 8.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, played 38 minutes per game while hampered by injury. In that run, let's go through the entire playoffs last year. During the playoffs last season, Luka Doncic, 28.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, 8 assists. You're getting a guy who's averaging almost 29, 10, and 8, and you're arguing conditioning issues? You're saying that you're over him? Jason Gallagher, formerly of The Ringer, now with Old Man in the 3, a Dallas Maverick fan, one of my favorite follows on Twitter. Let's be clear. Most people in the Mavs organization were not over him. In fact, most are furious, the tweet reads. One small man and his weird inner circle were over him, and they'll always be remembered as, quote, the biggest morons in sports. I don't disagree, Jason. I do not disagree. All right, let's keep it moving. Here's a take that, again, not everything has to have a take. Not everybody has to have an opinion on everything. In fact, I would argue that most things do not need an opinion. This is from our guy, Sam Amick, senior writer over The Athletic and USA Today, Sports Illustrated. He argues this isn't a great fit between LeBron and Luka. We'll hear what he has to say. I have a take on why that is the wrong idea.
How do you think he's going to mesh with LeBron James on the floor?
It's interesting. Those guys do the same thing. You know what I mean? Is a younger version. There are a lot of duplication of skill set. And that is the other offshoot of this whole situation. As I wrote last night, I do certainly think that it calls into question now what LeBron's future with the Lakers might be. He's got the player option for next year. If he wanted an extension this summer, as of now, I think that would be, unlikely to happen. And when you look at the basketball fit, you talk about there only being one ball. This is not only a case of there only being one ball, but, the more you take the ball out of Luka's hands, even if it's in LeBron's, this is 40-year-old LeBron James. It's not 25, 30, 35-year-old LeBron James. So the fit's not great, in my opinion. We'll see if JJ Redick has some creative ways to make the most of it and not have that, duplication hurt the Lakers. But I think that's going to be tricky.
How do you think he's going to?
Here's the deal. When it comes to Luka and LeBron, you have 2 of the best playmakers in NBA history on your roster. You have 2 supercomputers, guys who see angles before other players, before coaches, before analysts. I would be remiss to say, because I will own it. If I make a mistake, I'm a big enough man to say I made a mistake. If I'm somebody who makes the right call, I don't gloat. I don't make circles. You should know that about me. I'm not somebody that's going to rub your face into it. And then when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. We've done this before when it comes to LeBron. In 2010, when he joined the Miami Heat, the big three. When he joined Dwayne Wade, the conversation was there's two alphas. They do a lot of the same thing. They both need the ball in their hand. How are they going to make this work? When he went to Cleveland, there's one ball. How is it going to work with Kyrie Irving? How is it going to work with LeBron James? In both locations where there was a ball-dominant guard, LeBron was able to make it work and win a title. Why would it be any different now? Why would it be any different that you have a guy in LeBron James who can make it work with just about anybody? Who at his peak of his powers, we had conversations about could he take teams that were in the lottery to the NBA playoffs, to the NBA finals, and he did that in 2018 with that Cleveland Cavaliers team, who without him would have been a lottery team. Got him to the NBA finals. Luka does a lot of what LeBron does. That is correct. But if you've watched the Lakers this year, Austin Reeves has carried a lot of that weight when it comes to possessions where LeBron does not bring the ball up the court, where he is not the play initiator. Now you're replacing Austin Reeves with maybe the best offensive player in the league in Luka Doncic. They do a lot of the same things. That is true. There are some redundancies in their game. That is true. But that does not necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. You are getting a guy in Luka who I heard today was an empty stats merchant, was a guy who had very good offensive stats, but defensively was a zero. Where was the same energy with James Harden? James Harden won an MVP playing limited to no defense for that Houston Rockets team. James Harden was an offensive machine in Houston that would have won a title if not for the Golden State Warriors having Kevin Durant and Chris Paul. Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. That Harden was on the precipice of being a guy. Right now, he's one of the worst or best players not to win a championship. That's currently his legacy. But Luka has redundancies with LeBron. That's not a bad thing necessarily. Now, this is Brian Windhorst, who spoke today on NBA TV, NBA Today on ESPN, and spoke about the plan the Mavericks have, because why in the world would you trade 25-year-old Luka?
So I think what's important to realize here is that they have their other star player, Kyrie Irving, is in his early 30s. They have a timeline that has to match Kyrie. And so going and getting 5 or 6.
First off, let's slip into that real quick. Why are you moving your timetable up? Even if you hate Luka, even if you think Luka is a slob and a fatty and a chain smoker and a wino and a drunk, even if you think that Luka Doncic kicks puppies and spits on babies, why in the world, if you're a basketball-minded guy, would you move your timetable up, not 2 years, not 3 years, 6 years in age, 25, 31? That is what the Mavericks are doing. Let's keep hearing it from him.
Or 8 first-round picks only helps you so much. They also wanted to get a player who could help them win now. They believe this team is good enough they can compete for this year. So you start to have those parameters, you start to narrow it down. That's how they identified Anthony Davis. The more I've talked to executives and people over the league of the last 2 days, I've come to understand why they decided to move off of Luka. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why they did.
Can you share a little bit more just what that understanding is?
It's like what Shams said. They didn't believe in giving him the $350 million. That is a controversial and potentially catastrophic decision.
Yeah.
But once you've made that decision, now you can say, okay, what are we going to trade for? Well, they want to trade for somebody who could help them today, not a first-round pick in 2031. Okay, Anthony Davis, that makes sense. Even if you disagree with that, I can follow their thinking. Where I don't follow their thinking, where I stop, is how they didn't get more from the Lakers. That's the uncaused cause that I haven't quite reconciled, and I've yet to talk to somebody in the league that completely understands that. So I think okay,
This is what this reminds me of. And I'm not a fan of this show by any means, but this is what this reminds me of.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Griffin. Now, I know you've been here all day, so if you'll just sign this contract without reading it, I'll take your blank check, and you won't not be not loving your timeshare before you know it.
Well, look, Slick, we're not going to buy your lousy timeshare, all right? Now, where's my boat?
Hold on. You have a choice. You can have the boat.
You could have the boat, you could have Luka Doncic, or
the mystery box.
What, are you crazy? We'll take the boat.
No, not so fast, Lois. A boat's a boat, but the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. You know.
That is exactly what the Dallas Mavericks have done. That is exactly what they've done. They had a team that went to the NBA Finals last year. They had a team that was a game or two away, went to 5 from winning an NBA championship. But we want to go get Anthony Davis. We want to go get a guy who potentially could win us a championship because...
What, are you crazy? We'll take the boat.
No, not so fast, Lois. A boat's a boat, but the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. You know how much we've wanted one of those.
Then let's just...
We'll take the box.
We'll take the box. You gave up a boat.
Yeah, let's look in the box. It's not a championship team. Let's look at... I'm sorry. There we go. See, we're getting it. We will figure out all of our tech issues as we get going, right? All right. So finally, Mavs want to go to the finals. This is from Brian Windhorst again earlier today.
They want to go into the playoffs with AD, not with Luka. They want to go into the playoffs with AD, not with Luka. They want to go into the playoffs with AD, not with Luka. They want to go into the playoffs with AD, not with Luka. They want to go into the playoffs with AD, not with Luka. They want to go into the playoffs with AD, not with Luka.
Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. All right, when we come back, Myles Garrett requests a trade. Where could he go? Next on Zimmel TV.
That situation exists.
Welcome back to Zimmel TV. I am Andrew Zimmel, hanging out with you on a Monday of Super Bowl week, and the NBA took a lot of the headlines. However, the NFL stole them right back with arguably one of the biggest trade requests in recent history when it comes to NFL players. And this is Myles Garrett we're talking about, a guy who wants to win a Super Bowl according to him. Let's hear from Adam Schefter.
I don't think so. Again, is this a business play by Myles Garrett? I don't think so. I think he legitimately wants to be in a place where he feels like he's going to have a chance to win the Super Bowl. But again, is there anything that could get him off that changes his mind?
So, last question from me, and obviously we're all learning about this as we go. So that means he's only going to teams that are contenders? Is that what we're hearing? Or
that's what, in his ideal world, that's what he's doing.
Okay.
Now, again, what if they said, we're trading you, I'm making this up, to Chicago? Is Chicago, is Chicago a Super Bowl contender right now? But what if Chicago, he feels like, I think the best way of saying it, he wants to go to what he believes is a Super Bowl contender. But I think, as we talk about this, I think that would be a place that he believes gives him more hope to win a Super Bowl championship than the Browns do. And there are probably multiple NFL franchises that would fall into that category, because I think if you had to consider it, 31 teams probably would be interested in trading for Myles Garrett. Again, is this a business play by Myles?
I want to go through the teams that potentially could be going after Myles Garrett, because he says there's 31 of them. That makes sense. But let's go through and say to ourselves, they're not going to send him to a team in the AFC. No right-minded team would go, or no right-minded team would send their best player, arguably their best defensive player in franchise history, to an AFC team. So let's go now down the NFC. Let us look at the NFC and teams who potentially could trade for him. The Philadelphia Eagles are in the Super Bowl this weekend. If they trade for Myles Garrett, Roger Goodell is going to have to do something. We're going to have to hear Roger Goodell change up change a lot of rules when it comes to the way the trades work if the Eagles end up with him. Washington is a team that I would like to see Myles Garrett on. They're a team that went to the NFC Championship game this year. I want to prove that it's not a fluke. I like Jaden Daniels. The Commanders would have to move heaven and earth to make this happen. The Dallas Cowboys, who are already in a salary cap tough spot, would you potentially move off of Micah Parsons for Myles Garrett and send some picks? I don't know if the money works, but that would be intriguing to me. And then the New York Giants, who are nowhere close to a Super Bowl. So right now we have two teams, we'll call it 2.5 teams, that can make a trade for Myles Garrett. Detroit Lions. I like Detroit. In fact, I like Detroit so much that I would not want them to move off of any of their pieces and try to go get Myles Garrett. As a fan of the Vikings, I hate the Lions. As a sports talk host, I'll tell you the Lions are a team that is going to win the Super Bowl if they keep this core together. I like what the Lions have. The Minnesota Vikings got a little cap space, don't have a lot of picks. If you move off of Sam Darnold, you have a little bit of money freed up, a little bit more money freed up. Would you go into salary cap hell for Myles Garrett? And can you guarantee that Myles Garrett's going to stay there for the remainder of his career? This feels like the type of move that a team that feels like they're one piece away makes. The Vikings, after losing in round 1 of the playoffs this year, are not one piece away. I don't think the Vikings are a Myles Garrett away from winning a Super Bowl. I would not recommend this move. The Green Bay Packers, I do recommend this move. Myles Garrett would be a Reggie White type of player. He would be a guy who instantly makes an impact on your team. In fact, let's do this. Pro Football Reference. I want to pull this up because Reggie White is a guy who immediately I thought about when we considered making a move, a Myles Garrett type of move. Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion, all pros. You know the rest. Green Bay, he went there when he was 32 years old. That fits the Myles Garrett run. That fits a guy who is trying to go and win a Super Bowl. Myles Garrett could do something similar to what a guy like Reggie White did. Reggie White won a Defensive Player of the Year award in his 37 year in the league. This is a move that I could get behind if I was a betting man. This is a move I could get behind if I was somebody who was rooting for Myles Garrett to end up in a spot that could win him some games. I do not hate going to the Green Bay Packers. I don't hate that idea at all. All right, let's keep talking. Chicago Bears, are they a Super Bowl? Are they Myles Garrett away? No. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that continues to win games in one of the worst divisions in football. Are they a Myles Garrett away from winning the Super Bowl? No. Could they make a move? Yes. I do think that would be a spot for him. The Atlanta Falcons, moving off Kirk Cousins, trading an injured quarterback for Myles Garrett, or a guy who has lost his starting spot essentially for Myles Garrett. This is one of those that makes it a little bit less sour. But again, Browns might not trade him. Carolina Panthers and New Orleans Saints, both automatic no's. LA Rams, a team that was in the playoffs this year, had a good run. Are they Myles Garrett away? No. Could Sean McVay find a way to make this happen? Probably. Seattle Seahawks, I like what they're cooking up there. Are they a Myles Garrett away from winning the Super Bowl? No. Does it fit his criteria? Maybe. Arizona Falcons and San Francisco 49ers. 49ers are a team that I'm very intrigued by. It feels like they're pushing all of their chips in the middle of the table to try to make something happen. Again, not necessarily in love with it. Do consider them a team that could go and get them. And we played these odds a little earlier. We'll play them again here for him. Myles Garrett, 2025 odds. Detroit Lions are now currently the betting favorite. This is from bookies.com. Chargers in conference, not going to happen. Commanders, Browns, 49ers, Eagles, Falcons, Bills, field. I like the Bills. I hope the Bills make a move. I don't think any of those big name players are going to the Buffalo Bills based solely on the fact that they are in conference, and nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to send Myles Garrett to another AFC team. He's just too good. That is going to do it for us today. We did an hour and a half. First show in the books. Podcast version of the show will be available wherever you get your podcast. We'll get that cut up for you and posted ASAP. I want to thank you guys for hanging out and watching episode 1, season 1, episode 1 of Zimmel TV. Again, we got to come up with a better name. If you have a better name, put it in the comments below. Send it to us. Tweet at us. You see all of the different places you can find us at Andrew_Zimmel on Twitter and on Instagram. Follow us there. We put up content daily on Reels as well as on YouTube Shorts. Maybe that's where you found us. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to both the channels, Twitch and on YouTube. Help us grow the brand. I very, very much appreciate you guys for joining us in the basement, right? We're coming from basement level. We're going to build this thing up. It's going to be absolutely outstanding, incredible, but we need your help to do it. Thank you so much. And we'll be back again tomorrow for a shortened episode. It's going to be an hour-long show tomorrow on all your platforms. So thanks again. And